Right, so my name is Bénédicte Coste, and I'm going to talk about Patrick Geddes from the Evergreen to the Collège des Ecossais. So what follows takes its cue from two recent publications on Geddes and fin de siècle Scotland, Murdo MacDonald's Patrick Geddes' Intellectual Origins, and Michael Shaw, whom I thank with Matthew Creasy for inviting me to that stimulating webinar, the fin de siècle Scottish Revival, Romance, Decadence and Celtic. It also takes its cue from a long-standing interest in Geddes, fueled by a recent publication in French, Patrick Geddes et le Collège des Écossais, La Colline et le Monde, by Jean-Paul Andrieux and Marion Geddes, granddaughter of Geddes. Finally, I recently revisited the Collège in Montpellier, along with the Schools of Architecture, which is another Geddes-inspired building thanks to Jean-Luc Doumenc, its former dean, whom I also thank for narrating the whole history of the school's construction. My sources are bilingual, binational, bicultural, which is quite appropriate for a figure who engaged in a long-standing and sustained relationship to France and the French, and who died in Montpellier in 1932. I won't engage in a detailed presentation of Geddes' numerous achievements and interests because they've been explained by two of his biographers, Philip Boardman and Helen Miller. We know that Geddes engaged in multi and interdisciplinarity throughout his life, and he can be described as a biologist, botanist, town planner, geographer, sociologist and educator. He created Edinburgh first summer schools, rehabilitated and created Ramsay Garden, the Outlook Tower, and devised exhibitions on city planning, which landed him an appointment as Professor of Sociology in Mumbai in 1915. He also set up a publishing house, Patrick Geddes and Colleagues, where his latest writings were published, and developed that well-known northern seasonal, the Evergreen, which is currently being edited and annotated to be available on an open access platform. Murdo MacDonald, Conrad Place, Lauren Quistrat-Jensen, and others have explored the four issues of the magazine. They have posited it within the fin de siècle publishing industry as a quality illustrated magazine that provided a launching pad for numerous visual artists, including John Duncan, Helen Hay, Nellie Baxter, and Marion Mason. The Evergreen was a Scottish magazine showcasing a series of Scottish poets and writers, along with Geddes as the essayist, the main one, and engaging simultaneously in literary and artistic cosmopolitanism. As MacDonald details, Belgian, French, and Breton material occupies a major part of the magazine, therefore delineating a politics of regional cosmopolitanism. By regional cosmopolitanism, I mean a politics that aims at counterbalancing the hegemony of centers, capitals, metropolises, and states by a fair infusion of regional and marginalized cultures with a nod to Celtic culture, of course. As opposed to, let's say, the cosmopolitanism of the infamous Yellow Book, founded upon nation-states and national cultures, the Evergreen showcases regional literature and art, along with a strong commitment to France, that commitment translating in the inclusion of writings by French intellectuals such as Reclus, Klein, Desmoulins, Desjardins, stems from Geddes' stay in France from 1879 onwards, including his trip to Montpellier in 1889, to work with botanist Charles Flow. MacDonald's detailed presentation of the magazine's content suggests an alliance between Celtic nations, Belgium, but I also want to emphasize that the Evergreen rests on or runs along dividing lines between, on the one hand, an axis Scotland and France, and on the other hand, an axis where Celtic material, including Edith Wingate Rinder's rendering of Breton legends, rub shoulders with Belgian writings, for instance, that is to say, with marginalized minor literatures in the Deleuzian sense of the word, of course. The magazine therefore stages tension between centers and peripheries that characterize Geddes' other personal achievements. I'm also indebted to Michael Shaw for pointing out in his monograph how fin de siècle Scottish identities were negotiated between the Highlands and the Lowlands, along with the tension between contending visions of Celtic foreignness, Celtic quote-unquote backwardness, against, of course, the stadial background. What he shows is also their assertion against the backdrop of nation-states and empires that tended to push them to liminality. This, I argue, is a tension that Geddes acknowledged and which partly shapes his further ideas and realization that are Janus-like with their international perspective as well as with their marked regional outlook. Likewise, his summer meetings in Edinburgh featured international participants, but also among those participants with a strong regionalist background and agenda. And in fact, Geddes calls for a revision of what we call cosmopolitanism. It's not simply the circulation of ideas, objects, and persons among nation states, but the circulation of those among regions that, at the time, were conceived of as peripheral. Such revision translated in Geddes' regional surveys and his constant vision of place as local units. Such local units, such places, are pitted against an international perspective only to connect them in a new way. Now, I turn to the Collège des Ecossais in Montpellier. Its history is well known. In 1924, an ailing Geddes from India stopped in Montpellier and purchased 14 acres of untilled land besides 2 decaying houses in Les Brusses in the outskirts of Montpellier to create a college, meant to accommodate and educate students from across the world. The college was built and welcomed its first students in 1925. Geddes later added the Collège des Indiens, and he also envisaged a Collège des Américains, a Collège des Scandinaves that unfortunately never saw the light of day. Students came from Scotland, from England, India, the United States, and they were expected to graduate at the University of Montpellier while acquiring a Geddesian education that engaged with the senses, the body, physical activity, and included, of course, conversations in French and socialization with the French. What is perhaps less known is that in 1926, Geddes acquired the Château d'Assas, a decaying folly in the nearby eponymous village, which was used as a place for rest and field work. He also had a scheme for rehabilitating the whole village and, thanks to Flau, reforesting the Garrigue. Parties of students and of academics took day trips to Assas, including Helen Ogilvy and Alexander Peacock, both of whom have left descriptions of their visit there. The projected regeneration of Assas was part of that, I quote, and this is Geddes, a movement of village renewal so necessary here. And Geddes further envisioned what he called the Cité universitaire méditerranéenne, which was, he said, a culmination so far of all my schemes of university design, not only now from here to Montpellier, or even from Assas, but from Égual to Zoological Station, and with contact by and by with the cities of the university's province, from Arles, Nîmes, Avignon and Tarascon on one side, to Béziers, Narbonne, and so on the other. One of the most striking features of the Collège was the use of symbolism both for the building and for the gardens that Geddes created. Now, my second contention is that those gardens, and more generally the whole Montpellier Assas project, is a materialization of the Evergreen's contents and form. Not only is it a complete living symbol of Geddes' life's work, as Meller has it, but it also embodies the cultural politics of the Fin de Siècle magazine with its multiple tensions between nation-states and peripheries, its regional identities that Geddes explicitly posits against metropolis. He conceived of France at the time as, and that's a very interesting quote, the Nordic Mediterranean ellipsis in which Paris occupies the main position, but in which Montpellier is the second centre. France was no longer seen as a centralized political entity, but as a bipolarized geographical area, with the south counterpoising the north. Such visions are arguably derived from the fancier conceptions of Celtic identities that Geddes developed. Now, I just want to emphasize the college and the colleges and garden symbolism to show their continuity with that of the Evergreen. So in the college we find an outlook tower, we do find frieze displaying Palace Athene's Hall, and the three doves already present in the Evergreen and in Patrick Geddes' and colleagues' publications. We know that those three doves represent sympathy, synthesis, and synergy. According to Boardman, who was a resident in the 30s there were tables of the law representing ethics, the butterflies, the psyche, the rainbow aesthetics, and the line standing for logics. Peacock was struck by Arthur Geddes' coat of arms, structured by a St. Andrew cross, displaying a triple-towered castle in the middle, two doves in the upper quarters, and a lily in the lower quarter. Of course, that symbolism is reminiscent of the magazine's visual content. The Evergreen symbolism appears to have been translated into stone as well as into the gardens. No longer extant, we can reconstruct them thanks to testimonies and to some photographs that I've somehow showed, but I cannot show most of them for copyright reasons. In 1930, visitors and students Geddes liked to entertain there would have seen statues representing muses, a Hegelian path, and an Olympus circle patiently built over 5 years. I quote, "Nearly every tree, flower and stone grounds has its proper significance and its place in the plan. For example, the philosophies of Hegel and Auguste Comte are presented in their essence with God's own developments and synthesis. The sciences are classified on a garden terrace," Boardman comments. Peacock also remembers the Little Woods, Philosophenweg, and a quarry. Philosophenweg is Philosopher's Path. The college gardens seem to have been composed of a series of squares, with each of them having a specific plant or flower chosen for its importance in Geddes' triad of work for place. In 1932, Dorothy Price mentioned a Mediterranean garden, a jardin de rocaille, and a straight path leading to a paved circle where 6 plinths awaited their statues and sometimes accommodated students that Geddes enticed to strike a pose. With its attentive use of the geographical situation, its adroit cultivation of the resources, and its carefully devised symbolism, the garden is also a translation of Geddes' fancier aims and visions, a last opportunity, I quote, to turn his dreams, his plans, his crafts, into firm stone structures, in his hope that they would testify by their solid presence to his ideas when he was no longer there to explain them. That's Boardman. Geddes acknowledged that the gardens were a resurrection of his own past. "I dream anew," he wrote, "of getting at my long-laboured botanic opus entombed since I left Dundee, and indeed never cleared up there." The college was not simply absurd, as Mumford, lamenting Geddes' employing his talents in far-fetched schemes, called it. It is part of a fancier cosmopolitanism that adroitly negotiates cultural identities between peripheries and centres, embracing Celts, Scots, Bretons, Indians, and claiming the relevance of those and of smaller units to oppose states' hegemonies. One of the last texts that Geddes privately printed in 1931 was a Centenaire de Jeanne d'Arc that you can read on my PowerPoint presentation. The poem not only celebrates the Old Alliance, it's a moving gesture to John Duncan's Joan of Arc and the Scots Guards, dating from 1896. A black and white version appeared in the Evergreen on that summer, entitled The Way to Reims, to celebrate the opening of the Franco-Scottish Society in Paris. But in 1931, Geddes celebrates both the Alliance and Duncan's contribution to the Evergreen. Today, the Collège accommodates some services for the French national education, but up the hill stands the School of Architecture, which is also built along Geddesian principles, and which was built under the guidance of Henri Schimmerling, a former translator and lawyer at the Collège between 1933 and 1935, and who later taught in the school, so that in fact the inheritance or the heritage of Geddes and his ideas still survive on that hill. Thank you for listening to me.